not called predicting Trump, because I think that's impossible. But I think what people have to understand is that we have two competing alternative realities. And one of the great tests of the Trump team is going to be with a little bit of pressure. They were pushing NATO, for example, to spend more money and meet its fair share. They were not patsies for anybody. They had an extraordinary historic moment in Riyadh, comparable to anything any American president has done. So they were doing well. How were they doing it? They were disciplined. They were strategic. They stayed on message. They didn't play games with the elite media. Meanwhile, backing eavesdropped on by Obama, which we now know is true. You believe that you want to find a way to break out of the current relationship with Russia. Is there anything illegitimate about a new administration with any country in the world? The answer is no.
Of course not.
And you have the right, quote, unnamed sources.
Right.
That's exactly.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, because how many stories are leaked, these bombshells, based off of a letter or just an unnamed source? No one knows where it comes from.
But let's draw a distinction. I wrote my newsletter this week on the very real notion that we should lock up people who leak secrets. I want to draw a distinction. There's political garbage. There are people who go across to the Starbucks near the White House, and they sit and they tell insider stories. That's unfortunate, and you ought to fire them if you can find them. But that's not the same as violating the Secrecy Acts. People who violate the Secrecy Acts ought to go to jail. What happened with challenges of the Trump administration and will help decide their fate in history. If the president would simply read what he writes, he would cancel the daily briefings. Why would you look at everything he writes about the fake media, about there are enemies, they're dishonest, they're totally dishonest, they're unbelievably dishonest. I mean, read the stuff he says. And then ask yourself, if that's all true, why would you play a game that legitimizes them by letting them in the White House for a daily briefing, which is all attack media? They don't care about information. Their job is to humiliate Spicer, find a way to catch him off guard, play gotcha games. And I've said strongly, and I'm going to keep saying it, they ought to cancel the daily briefing, because it is nothing except a vehicle for the attack media.
It's like briefing the Hillary Clinton campaign staff, but it's got to be frustrating. I mean, it's hard to imagine a better first foreign trip for a president, yet the whole time the so-called mainstream media and fake news are calling out other issues that are not even a scandal. And then you've got even more so this idea that there's a shakeup coming. There's always a looming shakeup. And so and the Washington Post and New York Times have two headlines today about what's going to happen when they come home, who's in, who's out. So we did a little research on some headlines that have been out in the mainstream media since January. Of all the people that the knives are out for, right, that are soon to be gone, it just turns out none of them are gone yet. So there's knives were out for Reince Priebus in March. The downfall of Kellyanne Conway was coming in February. Bannon's job was in danger in April. And it goes on and on with, H.R. McMaster, the knives are out for him in May. Sean Spicer.
Spicer's been out since the beginning.
He's been out for forever. Sebastian Gorka. The knives are out for Gary Cohn in March. And now even President Trump will resign soon, according to this media. I mean, the way the palace intrigue, it's not reporting. It's just gossip to try to take this White House down.
But you got to erase everything you learned as a child about the news media. All right?
Yep.
Look, lions eat zebras. Okay, this may seem like an odd parallel, but think about it. If I said to you, oh, there's a lion eating a zebra, you wouldn't go, oh, my gosh, I thought they'd become friends. How could that lion be eating his friend? You go, yeah, they're a lion. They eat zebras, okay? The left-wing media hates Donald Trump. The left-wing media wants to destroy Donald Trump. This is why they should cancel the daily briefings. The left-wing media sits up all evening drinking and talking to each other thinking, what can we do? When they wake up in the morning, their opening line to themselves is, I know Donald Trump did something horrible. I wonder what it is. Now, the White House has to get over this, and frankly, all of us who are their friends have to get over this. The New York Times is their mortal enemy. The Washington Post, their mortal enemy. CNN was 93-7 negative, according to Harvard. 93-7. Why would you let anybody from CNN have anything to do with the Trump administration when they are 93-7 negative?
Well, how do you get that balance right, though, Speaker? Because, as you know, there's a real important role for media. I mean, we are in media as well. We try to do the best job that we can. But you don't want to live in a place like North Korea. So where do you find that balance of, not having press briefings, but also letting the media do their job?
Well, first of all, the president has 1,000 ways to communicate with the American people. He can give formal speeches. He can tweet. He could do Facebook Live. He could have Skype events with people around the country. And all of his cabinet officers can also communicate. And I have no problem if they want to do off-camera briefings. But my point to you would be the media has an obligation to cover what it covers. It doesn't have an obligation. There's no requirement in the American system for people to have the kind of dog and pony show on television we have. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, at his very first press briefing, kicked out, and you won't be back in the briefings.
Well, there's been relationships, obviously, with the press closer. JFK, of course, relationship during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, could have created even more chaos had the press not listened to what the president had to say. I think that's gone. That civility is long gone.
If consider, just for a second, Melania, who was a terrific First Lady of the United States, who looked fabulous everywhere, if she were a liberal Democrat, she'd be on the cover of every woman's magazine in America, right? Okay. So let's start with that as an example. Fight with the media than they spend trying to communicate the major issues to the country.
Exactly right.